Hi guys, my name's Peter and welcome back to my channel. Finally, I'm back to making videos again, and what better way to get back into the swing of things than with a video that's been in the works for about 3 months now. Back when I bought this bag in February, I thought I'd give myself about 2 weeks to get to grips with it and release the video, but I kept pushing it back because I wanted to become really comfortable with it and give an in-depth review about what it was like to daily drive. It's also given me the opportunity to see how this bag compares against one that is currently trending right now, the 3A1 from Acronym. If you aren't so much interested in seeing the review of the R221 and only want to see how it compares against the Acronym bag, then you can skip to this point in the video. Orbitgear has without a doubt become a key part in the techwear apparel space, particularly because they've cornered the market. They almost exclusively make bags, and their high levels of material quality, distinctive techwear aesthetic, and above all reasonable prices mean this small Indonesian studio produces about 100% of the bags you'll see on r/techwear. It makes sense though, a bag is an integral part of a functional outfit, and Orbitgear has such a wide range of different bags and different shapes that there'll undoubtedly be one that fits your use case. The one I ended up choosing was the R221, and when I got my hands on it I immediately understood why Orbitgear is so popular. Coming in about $230 US, it was, and still is, one of the most expensive single purchases I've ever done, but for something as well built as this, I think it's worth every penny. I love the aesthetics of it. The all black colour scheme is very nice, and the paneling and different materials break it up really nicely. The shape is really nice too. I like the way it sort of drafts inwards and the front flap follows it. X-Pack is definitely my favourite material, and there's no shortage of it here. The whole front section is made from it. On the back, they've sensibly cheaped out and used some regular synthetic canvas material, which I don't mind because it probably won't be visible most of the time. I really love the subtle texture that the X-Pack has. It gives a surface that would otherwise be flat just a little bit of extra definition. It's definitely the best quality bag that I've ever owned, and after using it as much as I could for about 3 months, there are no real signs of wear or any damage at all. One thing to note however is that since the bags are all made in studio in Indonesia, you will have to pay import tax if you're buying from anywhere that isn't Indonesia, and that actually caught me out, so be prepared for that. Also on the front are these two magnetic fidlock buckles which provide the main way to open the bag, and on top of being extremely satisfying, they are so easy to use and they make opening and closing the bag an absolute breeze. It's just so nice to flip the buckle generally near the other half and for it to just magically click into place. Opening the front flap gives you access to most of the features of the bag. Starting from the outside, you have this front pocket in which you can find another smaller zipped pocket. This is good for small and flat things like phones, wallets and keys, and the zip section gives you some good compartmentalization, especially if you want to keep your keys away from your phone screen. There's also a mesh pocket on the back which I usually use to hold my phone because it's easier to access than the front one. One thing to note is this whole section can get pretty cramped when you start filling up the main bit. Any forces from the inside of the bag outwards basically just compress these pockets. Moving on to the main section, I would describe it as having exactly the right amount of space that I need and no more. I bought this bag to be a daily carry for me as a student, where I would have pretty much the same set of things to take to and from lectures every day, so I wanted a bag that would fit just that and not be too big. I had a bit of concern over the sizing of the different bags that are in this range, and I couldn't really work out which one was right for me between this one and the slightly smaller R211. Last minute I actually decided to go for this one, and I'm glad I did because the Asian models that they use on their website are about a foot shorter than I am, so that was my only reference to determine how big the bags were, and it made the bags look slightly bigger than they actually were. Now that I have this bag in hand, I can safely say I made the right choice and it works perfectly for my purpose. The two sleeves allow me to fit my small laptop and an A4 sketch pad, then the main area has enough space to fit a good amount of small things like pencil cases, chargers and headphones. It's all completely waterproof inside thanks to the X-Pack on the outside and also this thicker PVC lining. Also the way this bag pinches flat and then rolls over at the top when you close the flap makes it impossible for water to get in anyway. If you need a bit more space, then you can convert the bag into roll top mode by rolling the flap up and using this velcro bit to attach it. At first the bag doesn't really want to do this and it feels like you're doing something you're not supposed to, but it does get easier as you wear it in. Now that the main flap is sort of part of the bag, you can open it with a secondary zip across the back of the bag, which is honestly a pretty useful way of getting in, and I would totally use it more if the fidlock buckles weren't so satisfying. Roll top mode also gives you access to the Moly webbing grid, which for me is the feature that takes this bag to the next level. Moly webbing comes as standard on most Orbitgear bags and most military bags in general for that matter. It's a widely used standard of attaching extra pockets and little things to bags to expand the functionality and carrying capacity of your bag to suit the situation. On this bag you have 5 cells on the front and 2 on each side. Orbitgear of course sells their own ones, but you can find MOLLE attachments for very cheap from just regular military surplus stores. I bought this water bottle holder for about £10 and it works fine. This is why I'm not worried about needing extra space in the bag, because if I ever start needing to carry more, I'll just find an attachment to fit it. Something I'm also doing at the moment is making my own custom attachments. I'm learning to sew, and making a small little pocket is a nice and manageable project and results in something that's actually useful. So far I've made a small zipper pocket and this hammock-esque thing that lets me strap jumpers and the like to the front of the bag. I found this one to be particularly useful because putting a jumper or coat in the main section of the bag takes up quite a lot of space. As for combinations of things you can add, the sky really is the limit. Since you can attach and detach things as you feel like it, you can truly customize the bag to whatever you need to carry on that particular occasion. That's a really attractive prospect for me because I intend this bag to be my go-to for any situation, and being able to kit it out almost like a video game loadout is really useful. Now, on to wearing it. The R221 is a messenger bag and comes as default with the Axis ADV Sling, which is a 3-point harness that works pretty similar to how car seatbelts work. The main sling that goes over your shoulder is very rigid and feels very durable, and is operated by this plastic buckle in the middle. The auxiliary strap that also comes off the harness point goes around the side of your body and secures with this little magnetic clasp. You can adjust the length of the main strap by pulling on the cord here, and you can sort of turn this into a quick release function, but I don't think it really works that well and I've not really had that much use for it. The side strap can also be tightened, but I don't really like the way it looks when it cinches up whatever you're wearing, which is a shame because functionally it allows for a lot of the load to be alleviated from your shoulder. The only major thing I have against this sling, and the bag in general, is that there is definitely a sweet spot for where it wants to sit on your back, and I feel that this spot changes based on whatever you're carrying. For example, if you put a laptop or anything flat in the sleeve, the bag can't follow your contours as well and you will need to readjust it. I feel like every time I put the bag on, I have to adjust it a lot to be comfortable, but once I've finally found that good position, it is a pretty comfortable bag to wear. Another thing that I will say is that it gets quite fatiguing on your shoulder after you wear it for a while. Orbitgear does sell their own shoulder pad, but it's pretty expensive for what it is, so I'm just going to make my own. All in all, wearing the bag around is a pretty good experience. I really don't like backpacks, I hate the strap going under my arm and also the way it gets in the way, but this bag is far more form-fitting and gives me much more freedom to move. It really does feel like an extension of yourself when you get it positioned in just the right spot. Now that we've spent a while familiarising ourselves with the R221, I want to put David up against the comparative Goliath that is the Acronym 3A1. And to do this, I'll be using clips from This Is Antoine's latest video where he reviewed it, because I'll be damned if I'm ever going to drop a bag on a bag. I'll start with why I think it's a fair fight. Both of them offer similar use cases, like a medium to light daily carry, but they occupy separate ends of the price spectrum, and in my opinion they represent the difference between old and new techwear. I also think it's fitting because Orbitgear, and to be honest most newer performance bag brands, have taken a veritable tree's worth of leaves out of the Acronym design book, that you start to put some Orbitgear bags next to the Acronym counterparts and let's move on from that. The first thing I'll say about the 3A1 is that I don't like it. I can appreciate it, being the originator and all that, but I don't like it. Its cousin, the 3A5, I like even less, which is pretty tough to do since the 3A1 sets a pretty low bar. The aesthetics of the bag is one of the main sources of my criticism. Simply put, I think it looks old, and that's hardly surprising since this bag was designed to look cutting edge and futuristic 20 years ago. 20 years is a long time. I don't even really need to list the amount of things that weren't invented 20 years ago because I wasn't invented 20 years ago. It looks very outdoor gear focused and military like, which is fine. More often than not, military styling is the foundation for technical pieces, but I feel like they forgot the urban part. Especially with these buckle styles, they look straight out of World War II. The whole bag in general just gives me World War II vibes, like I'm picturing a guy on an old motorbike using something like this to deliver codes and stuff from the front lines. I was trying really hard to nail the bag down in terms of the je ne sais quoi feeling that it gives me, and the best thing I can come up with is that it looks sort of like something that came out of Metro Exodus, which, if you don't know, is a dystopian game set in the future about humanity living after a nuclear fallout. You can tell it's futuristic, but everyone's reverted back to using old tech, and that's sort of what this bag is to me. The colours as well are okay at best. The only one that looks decent to me is the olive one. Ant makes it look good in this video and it's fairly monochromatic, but then you have the black, which I think looks terrible. I just really hate the way the olive trim contrasts with the black. Compare that to the R221, which is much more modern looking, which isn't really that surprising given the 17-year gap between their respective release dates. It's much more in touch with the current techwear landscape, and it isn't held back by having to be a legacy to 20-year-old design needs. I guess you could say that the R221, and by extension Orbitgear's entire range, is more cookie cutter techwear than the Acronym one, and the Acronym one is more interesting. The problem I have with this is that I dress techwear to look different to, I guess, regular fashion, so my desire to then stand out in an already niche community doesn't go far enough for me to want a bag that in my opinion doesn't look quite right. When you put them side by side, this generational difference is very apparent. Even though it's clear that Orbitgear have borrowed a lot of design influence from Acronym over the years, the Orbitgear bag just represents what I see techwear as much better than the Acronym one. I've also come into the aesthetic much later than someone like Ant has, so my views are obviously different from his. He might have seen this aesthetic grow and change over the years, whereas I just get to take it at face value what it is right now, and to me, the Acronym bag is just a product of its time. Speaking of product of its time, the functionality of this bag is also dated to me. Starting off with easy pickings, it has a headphone hole, since this was made 10 years before Bluetooth headphones were any good. I assume this is to plug in your Walkman and listen to vinyls on the go or something. Jokes aside, one of the main features of this bag is to be worn on the side, close to the hip, like a large holster or something. I actually quite like it in this form. I like the way the pockets were designed to part around the side of your hip, but what it does do is hamstring the bag in terms of what you can carry. In Ant's video, you see him always putting a soft jumper into the main pocket because anything with the slightest amount of rigidity will stop you from wearing this bag in arguably the way it was intended. When it's worn on the back, it looks saggy and too bulky, so I can see why Ant chose to wear it by his side in the Instagram post he did with it. This essentially means you can rule out putting laptops, sketchbooks, really anything that is flat in there. It doesn't even have a sleeve or anything to put it in, probably because it was designed in a time where laptops looked like this. I see some comments about how it sort of fits people's 10-inch iPads, and I'm just thinking you can't buy a 1.2k bag to sort of maybe fit the one thing you'll probably need to carry with you on a daily basis. Compare this to the 2 sleeves you get on the R221. Not having space for a laptop is definitely a deal breaker for me. As I said earlier, the main thing I'll be carrying as a design student is a laptop and a sketchbook, and I'm certainly not going to buy a bag that isn't designed to carry either of those two things. If I wanted to carry either of those two things, I'd have to get the 3A5, and at that point you lose that maneuverability aspect that these two bags have. I would even go so far as to say the R221 does some things better than the 3A1, and that is the customizability. I've already gone over the mods that I have for my bag, and on the 3A1 there is no option for that. If you like the 3A1 pocket arrangement, you could just recreate it on the R221 and take it off when you don't need it anymore. The magnetic fidlock buckles on the front are also objectively better than the awkward looking Spanish ones in terms of both usability and aesthetics. I think the only reason they still have them on the Acronym one is purely legacy. I see no reason otherwise. Then there's the bottom line, the price. I already touched on it earlier, but you can get the R221 for a fraction of the cost of the 3A1, and they have very similar constructions. Both are made of X-Pack, and that's where the main material cost comes from. So that begs the question, if Orbitgear can design and make the bag for so much less, yet still make them by hand in-house, where does that extra 1,000 euros go? Well, obviously you're paying for the brand and all that, but on the Acronym bag, I can appreciate that everything just works. Sometimes I have a few problems with getting comfortable with the R221, especially with both the laptop and the sketchbook in there. The front pockets and back pockets can get a bit cramped like I said, and I like to think that the ergonomics and interactions on the 3A1 are far more thought out. And from my personal experience studying design, getting to the level that the 3A1 is at is very difficult and does command that high price tag. That's pretty much all I have to say about these two bags. It's up to you to form your own conclusions really. I'll just say that paying so much more for a bag that meets the needs of a consumer from 20 years ago compared to one that meets my needs now doesn't really make that much sense to me. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to give it a like or maybe even subscribe. Thanks for making it all the way to this point, it really means a lot to me. More regular content should be returning now that exams are over, so look forward to that I guess, and I'll maybe see you next week.